It's often the case that people talk about journalism. They criticize journalism. They talk about the importance of journalism. They argue about who is a journalist and who's not, what is good journalism and bad journalism. And yet it's very rare for anyone to take a step back and define what that means, what journalism means. What it means to me, at least in terms of political journalists, there's a lot of different kinds of journalists. You can have cultural journalists and critics and all sorts of other things. But for political journalism, what journalism means to me is a focus on the most powerful institutional actors in society, or the most powerful and influential individuals, and to not glorify them or offer to serve as propagandists to promote them, but instead to subject them to journalistic scrutiny, to assess the truth of what they're saying, and not just to assess it, but to investigate, and then ultimately try to reveal to the public what the public ought to know that these industries and institutions are hiding, so that the public can make up their own mind about what they think of those institutions now that they're fully informed. Journalism does not mean telling somebody what to think or trying to lead them to a conclusion, but it does mean doing your best to expose the secrets, to pulling out the curtain so that you can see what is taking place there. That's what we do with powerful institutions like the U.S. security state, and the Pentagon and the military-industrial complex, and the media corporations that try and influence and propagandize Americans, and the institutions behind the censorship industrial complex. And among the most powerful institutions are the institutions, the corporations that compose the factory farming industry in the United States. They are responsible for almost all of our food supply. They employ hundreds of thousands of workers. They finance the campaigns of both political parties. They exert massive influence both in Washington and in the legislative houses of state governments. And they have impact and influence in almost every aspect of our lives, including the law and politics and our free speech rights. And so focusing on this industry, it's something I've done throughout my journalism career, though I don't think we've done a devoted show to this topic. We thought this was a good week when I was traveling to do so, to take a step back and ask you to pay attention and kind of be interested in this because of the impact that it has, regardless of what you end up concluding, was something very important to do. And it's particularly important because of how devoted these corporations have become to keeping the truth from you, to actually trying to enact laws using their influence over various lawmakers to make it illegal for activists and journalists to expose what it is that they do and to show you the truth about what takes place inside of these factory farms. Here from Forbes in May of 2016, and there are countless articles like this, the headline, "Big Agriculture Bullies and Lobbies to Keep Americans in the Dark." Anytime powerful institutions are working to keep you in the dark, you should want to turn on the lights or have journalists do their job and turn them on for you so that you can see what's going on. From quashing free speech to lobbying for laws that would allow it to hide what it doesn't want the public to see, big agriculture has perfected strategies for keeping consumers uninformed and for covering its unsavory tracks. When undercover advocates released a number of videos showing animal abuse on industrial farms and in slaughtering facilities, big agriculture barely blinked. Instead of being outraged at appalling living conditions, food safety concerns, or animal torture, Big Ag chose to lobby for state, quote, ag-gag legislation. Laws that would punish those who record and distribute images of horrifying conditions at animal agricultural facilities without the owner's consent. Big Ag has convinced House Republicans to include language in the proposed 2017 House Agricultural Appropriations Bill that would exempt agricultural commodity groups from Freedom of Information Act requests. Last year's fiasco at the American Egg Board likely precipitated Big Ag's efforts to get checkoff programs exempted from FOIA law. Emails obtained through a FOIA request show that egg board leaders had tried to undermine an egg-free mayonnaise competitor, Just Mayo. According to the emails, the Egg Board worked with a public relations agency to try to slow Just Mayo's growth, and at one point directed a consultant to call Whole Foods to ask that they keep Just Mayo off of their shelves. That should bother you no matter what your views are on any of this, that they are trying to create a legal framework where it is a crime to video or photograph what is taking place inside of those facilities to show the public if you don't have their permission to do so. It's a direct violation of free speech and free press laws, and fortunately, courts have finally begun to rule that way. Here from a release from Harvard University by Joseph William Singer in February of 2023 is a report on just one of those court rulings. Quote, "The Fourth Circuit strikes down North Carolina's ag-gag law under the First Amendment." Quote, "In a very complicated ruling, the Fourth Circuit has struck down North Carolina's ag-gag law that prohibited employees from engaging in, quote, undercover animal cruelty investigations and publicizing what they uncover on the grounds that it violates the First Amendment free speech rights. The North Carolina Property Protection Act prohibits, quote, intentionally gaining access to the non-public areas of another's premises and engaging in an act that exceeds this person's authority to enter. The court suggests that North Carolina can achieve any legitimate goals it has in protecting private property by focusing on the interests of trespass laws that protect the exclusive use of land. But unauthorized access can be prohibited that cannot be conditioned on regulating speech that is protected by the First Amendment." So much of what we learned has been through unauthorized reporting about the government. Snowden was unauthorized to take the evidence that proved that the NSA was illegally and unconstitutionally spying on Americans without warrants. WikiLeaks publishes unauthorized information. It's what journalists do. Of course, corporations don't want anyone reporting on the truth of what they're doing. They want to rely on propaganda and commercials and all sorts of fake branding to convince you that they're doing something that they are not in fact doing. And the reason why they are so eager to hide this is because there is now a growing group of people, activists and journalists, who understand that what is taking place inside these facilities is a moral atrocity and a threat to the public health and devastating in so many other ways. And it can't be hidden any longer because it affects all of you. It affects all of us. So one of the innovative ways that animal rights groups and animal welfare groups have developed for showing the reality is by using virtual reality technology to film inside of the factory farm so that you can see what it's actually like, the horrors and torture that is taking place there. Here from the New York Times in July of 2017, you see the headline, "Animal welfare groups have a new tool, virtual reality." Quote, "For years, animal rights advocates trying to expose bad practices in the meat industry have surreptitiously shot grainy photographs and handheld video. Now they have a more sophisticated weapon in their arsenal, the virtual reality camera." Wayne Swung, the founder of Direct Action Everywhere, who will be our guest in just a little bit, which also fights for animal welfare, called the technology, quote, "a game changer for animal advocates." Quote, "The meat industry always complains that we're using selective footage, narrow vantage points, and editing to make things seem worse," he said. "But with virtual reality, you're seeing exactly what we saw and are hearing exactly what we heard." In one sign of how quickly the technology is being adopted, among animal advocacy groups, Direct Action also released a virtual reality video on Thursday. It takes viewers into the barns at Circle 4 Farms in Milford, Utah, one of the largest pig production operations in the United States. The film shows sows with bloody and mangled teats, pregnant sows with gnawing on the bars of the narrow stalls that they live in until they give birth, and piglets clambering over and nibbling dead siblings. In a portion of the film, Mr. Swing narrates, dead piglets are piled up behind a sow who was wedged into a crate so tightly that she cannot move away from the mess. But a viewer can turn away from her to see and hear sows in similar straits all around her. Circle 4 is owned by Smithfield Foods, which was bought in 2013 by Shanghai International, one of China's largest meat processors. Kira Lombardo, a Smithfield spokeswoman, said the video had, quote, "blatant inaccuracies, such as his assertions that the animals shown in it are being starved." Now we're going to get back to the issue of pigs in just a second. Pigs are at least as intelligent as dogs are, more so, most tests show. They are as socially complex and emotionally developed as dogs are. They're extremely social animals. But in these factory farms, mother pigs are taken into a cage so tiny and narrow that they can't move, they cannot turn around, and they're kept there for a year or longer. And they go insane because just like if you put human beings in solitary confinement, because we are social animals, we will go insane. John McCain famously said that far worse than the physical abuse he suffered while detained by the North Koreans was the isolation that he was kept in. There's all kinds of studies about how prolonged isolation drives humans insane. It drives pigs insane as well. And you go into any of these factory farms and these pigs are so desperate to get out from these tiny little crates they're kept in that they start gnawing on the metal rods until their teeth fall out and their mouths are full of blood. They often just almost kill themselves by throwing themselves against the metal barriers until all their organs are scrambled. It's one of the most horrible things you will ever look at, especially given the capacity for thought and complexity and intelligence and social connection that pigs were born to fulfill. But what really is the most defining attribute of these factory farms is the utter and complete dehumanization, the need to absolutely cut off any sense of empathy that people have for animals. It's very common, it's a kind of cliche, but it's absolutely true that a lot of people who grow up to be serial killers or sociopaths or psychopaths begin by torturing small animals, things that most people can't do because our natural empathy for animals prevents us from doing so. It doesn't permit us from doing so. Sociopaths and psychopaths have no empathy. And people trained to work in these factory farms are trained, almost like people in the military are trained not to see the humanity of those they have to kill, to cut off that empathy, to suppress it, so that they can do unimaginable cruelty to animals. One of the things that is very common in egg farms is that hens that are bred to lay eggs are bred not to be eaten, but just to lay eggs. And as a result, the only chicks that have any value are female chicks because they keep those to lay the eggs. The male chicks have zero economic value to egg farms because they can't lay eggs and because they don't grow into the kinds of roosters that can be consumed as chickens, as food, because their body doesn't support them, they don't have the muscles, so they have zero economic value. And so what happens is when hens lay eggs and these chicks are born and are hatched, by the thousands, they are culled, meaning that on a conveyor belt, huge numbers of chicks are sent down this assembly line, and workers who are trained to identify their gender take out the male chicks on the first day of life. This is right when they're born, and they instantly mass kill them, either by throwing them into a container that kills them with carbon dioxide, or more commonly, just throwing them into a incinerator, something that just cuts their body until they're dead. And there's huge mountains of dead male chicks, not even a day old, who then get dumped into sewage, into communities, into water supplies. It is revolting. Here is a video from Animals Australia that shows you the process from March of 2023.
The other process sees workers sorting and separating male chicks from the females on a conveyor belt. The vulnerable baby chicks bounce off each other and the rails in this mechanized system. Finally, one by one, they drop off the belt, their lives are ended, and bodies shredded by a metal grinder.
All right, so there are workers who wake up every day and they go to work, and their job is to pick out male chicks that are about an hour old and to throw them into a metal grinder that chops up their body and kills them by the billions, What it's doing is these are creatures that are born as part of whatever you believe in, by God, by nature, by the universe, and they are bred to be instantly slaughtered by the billions. Here is a separate procedure that is used for chicks. It's called debeaking, because it's much easier to raise them if they don't have their beaks, so that they can't peck at or attack other hens. And the debeaking that gets done by the thousands every day, where they just cut off their beak with no painkillers, no anesthesia, they obviously suffer greatly. What it shows is just the complete humanity that has been stripped from this process. It is just purely industrialized, treating them like widgets at a factory, even though these are living, sentient beings who feel pain, who feel everything that highly developed animals feel. Take a look at this, and I think it really vividly illustrates the mentality behind it. Now, some of these are activist videos, so you can ignore the sad music and just analyze it yourself. I know that most people look at this and don't want to see it. They feel bad about it. They feel sadness and empathetic to these animals. Why? If it's so natural, we should be conditioned to be completely indifferent. Should be able to look at these videos all day and not feel the slightest thing. Here is a undercover film at Smithfield's Foods that shows, and this is from 2010, the way in which the pigs are kept in these crates that are so tiny they literally cannot stand up and turn around. They just sit there by themselves looking straight forward for years on end. So those are the gestation crates, and you see here one pig after the next, and this goes on for miles. These are huge, gigantic factories, and each one of these is a pig kept in a cage that is about the same size as the width of their body, so they can't turn around. Talk about hundreds of thousands and millions of them every day being kept this way.
What we found are extraordinarily inhumane conditions at Smithfield Foods, the largest pork producer in the entire world. I still remember the first time I ever laid eyes on a gestation crate facility, and seeing the helplessness of these animals who have done nothing to deserve the fate that they're enduring. Suffering inside of these crates is just absolutely devastating. The Humane Society of the United States has investigated one of Smithfield's breeding operations. This facility represents what gestation crate confinement is. Open wounds, pressure sores, infections, bleeding gums from biting the bars so much, and these animals aren't even being cared for with individualized veterinary attention. Regardless of how the system is managed, these pigs are barely able to move even an inch their entire lives. They're unable to walk around, to turn around. It causes them to quite literally go insane. This is one of the reasons why so many animal scientists and veterinarians have condemned this extreme confinement practice.
Smithfield, about, I would say, 3 weeks ago, made an announcement that we had made a decision to phase out the use of sow gestation crates in all of our company-owned farms.
So that's from 2007. This video is 2010. Here's a Smithfield executive claiming that they made a decision to phase out gestation crates. They've been doing this for many, many years because, again, these are not vegans objecting or vegetarians objecting. These are meat eaters who believe in the justice of killing animals for food. Many of them do, and yet that doesn't mean they endorse industrialized mass torture that causes these sentient animals to go completely insane.
Over a 10-year period.
Smithfield committed publicly to phasing out gestation crates within a 10-year period, receiving a lot of public praise for doing so. Now, just a couple years later, the company is saying that it no longer can meet its own very generous self-imposed deadline. That's completely unacceptable. Many other pork companies, such as, let's say, Maxwell Foods, which is one of the biggest pork producers in the country, is already 100% gestation crate free. Cargill, another major pork producer, is already 50% gestation crate free. The American Farm Bureau, the primary agribusiness lobby in the United States, funded a poll in which they found that an overwhelming majority of Americans find gestation crates to be inhumane. This is one of the reasons why 7 states in the country have already banned this practice, why all 27 member nations of the EU have banned the practice. Gestation crates are a practice of the past, not of the future, and Smithfield ought to be speeding up that trend rather than slowing it down.
So not only did the state of California, which he referenced there, ban the use of gestation crates inside California, and unfortunately most of the states that have done so are not the states where most of these farms exist. They exist in places like Iowa, where those states are completely dominated by these industries. But the Californians also went and, in a referendum, banned the importation into California of any pork products that are from factories that have gestation crates. And the association representing this industry sued the state of California. It went to the Supreme Court. The Biden administration entered the case and sided on the side of the animal agriculture industry, saying California has no right to ban the importation of pigs from other states that don't have the same ethical standards as they do. And the Supreme Court ruled in favor of California, one of the most important victories in the history of animal agriculture and animal activism at the Supreme Court level. Here I want to show you one more video of what's called the culling process, where the male chicks are selected and picked out the second they're born or minutes after they're born, and then just immediately extinguished. There are a lot of philosophies, a lot of religions, a lot of cultures that believe in the justice of killing animals and using them for food, but I don't think there's any humane point of view or philosophy or worldview that can justify treating live creatures that are part of the universe in a completely industrialized and inhumane way. I don't believe there's anyone looking at these videos who doesn't feel a sense of serious discomfort. You should ask yourself why that is. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.